This is TWiT.
About the New York Times?
I do. I love them so much. So I hate the New York Times. However, as a content creator, I have to say, every day. So I do read the paper. I should say I read it. I also read the Washington Post every day.
I'm aware of
papers you love to hate. You got to have them.
Yeah.
I don't mind the Washington Post usually, although they're tech guys. I have.
Don't read the tech section away.
Yeah, I know. Yes, I shouldn't even bother. But the New York Times broadly makes me insane every day. But okay, whatever. Whatever you think of the New York Times, they do generate it.
Just play Wordle and move on.
Sure. And even they screwed that up. Okay, whatever. I'm sorry. Anyway, the point is, don't get me started. If they ruin the Wirecutter, I'm going to murder somebody. But the point is, anyway, I love Wirecutter. I pay for that separately. Let me tell you my biggest gripe with the New York Times. This is what the New York Times does. I pay for this thing. I also pay for the Wirecutter, right? So that whatever that costs, whatever that subscription costs, if you want to play their games, there's a cost for that. They have the cooking.
But you can buy one thing that gives you everything, right? Don't you?
Yes, you can. And every single time I log into the web, I get a full page ad that says, "Hey, we know you're a subscriber, but you should subscribe to everything." You know what? Screw you. That's offensive. That's crazy. You have ads and you're trying to upsell me from the thing I'm already paying for? No. I hate them so much. Anyway, the New York Times has sued Microsoft and OpenAI, which I think is beautiful, for copyright infringement. The idea is that they have basically can demonstrate very easily that they have trained OpenAI, ChatGPT, on New York Times copyrighted.
You know what else? You know who else is trained on New York Times content? Me.
Nice.
In fact, we do exactly what OpenAI does with all of our shows, which is read the stories and then talk about them.
Oh.
Are you going to criminalize ingesting content?
Well, so what you're just yes. So
if a machine does it, it's different than if a human does it.
No. I think the argument here is that actually, I don't think Microsoft and or OpenAI have made the argument, because these companies talk privately trying to settle this, right? That they are doing some sort of a transformative. There's a transformative process that occurs where we are digesting your content, but the thing we're spitting out is not your content. It's a discussion about whatever topic that was informed by your content, to which the New York Times says, excuse me, look at these verbatim side by sides where you're literally taking our exact content that we charge people to read.
You're making the fair use argument. Like what Leo does when he references a New York Times article is in fair use. By the way, because it's editorialization.
Even if I read a paragraph verbatim, it's still fair use.
Yeah, because you editorial.
And incidentally, as Mike Masnick points out, the New York Times does this to other journals too. They want to criminalize their own behavior.
I think you're overreacting here, Leo. I think this is.
I don't think that's what this is at all. Actually,
I think this.
They don't. That's an unintended consequence. They want to have a carve out because they're special, and they're not special.
They want to have a carve out because what they do is expensive, and they create unique, content of their own that they charge people for. And they would like to be paid for this if it's going to be used for this purpose. This is actually the closest comparison I think there is for this is what Google did with news publishers, big and small, from around the world, where they were just screen scraping and putting the results into search. And publishers started suing them and governments started going after them. So now there's this thing called Google Publisher or whatever that has an agreement with every content publishing house on the entire planet. And every month there are multiple blog posts about how we've reached a new agreement with someone else who creates their own content. What the Times want is that to happen, which I think is perfectly, as a content creator, I think is perfectly
Let me read
reasonable.
this paragraph from Mike Masnick at TechDirt. The larger point is, if the New York Times wins, well, the New York Times might face its own receiving end on lawsuits. The New York Times is somewhat infamous in the news world, and you might verify this or not, for using other journalists' work as starting point and building off of it, frequently without any credit at all.
Okay.
If the New York Times successfully argues that reading a third-party article to help its reporters, quote, learn about the news before reporting its own version of it is copyright infringement, it might not like how that's turned around by tons of other news organizations against the New York Times. This is a common creator's argument that somehow something I'm doing is special in a way when a machine does it than when a human does it.
That's not it. That is not it at all. No, the point is verbatim copying and
You're saying somebody might go to
under your own paywall.
Somebody might go to ChatGPT instead of reading the New York Times?
I'm saying that the New York Times has demonstrated that they spit out verbatim copy from the New York Times to
right, but it's still
people
fair
that are
use.
paying them instead.
It's still fair use if it doesn't have an economic impact on the New York Times. Nobody's going to read the New York Times by going to ChatGPT.
Oh, that's like saying no one's going to read the New York Times on the internet, which is what people probably did say 20 years ago.
No, it's not like that.
It is a little bit like that.
You would be nuts. Look, go ahead and use ChatGPT and try to get the New York Times story. You're not going to get it. No, you're not going to get it. Just because the New York Times was able to configure some prompt to get that, you are not going to be able to read the New York Times on ChatGPT. That's not the usage of it.
Well,
and if that's not the usage, then it's fair use.
Leo, if somebody was taking your podcast and just republishing them.
But it's not republishing them. That's the thing. New York Times claims it's republishing them. It's not. It's transformative use. And I tell you, it is a slippery slope if the New York Times wins this, which, by the way, they're not. Because every single court has held again and again that whatever an AI does with that content is transformative use. It is fair use.
So I think the end result is actually going to be just that there will be a settlement and that the New York Times will be paid for this use. And that's what it really wants. And the lawsuit was a measure it had to take because they could not reach an agreement as to what this was worth. That's something they've come out and said.
Unfortunately,
we tried in good faith.
Google has opened this can of worms by paying some journalism sites. And I think actually OpenAI has done it as well. Sites. And I think OpenAI has as well. And so unfortunately, they've opened this can of worms. I wish they had just said, no, this is transformative use. This is no different than a human reading.
It's a tough thing. It's a tough one. That's a tough one. I don't know.
You're anthropomorphizing software there, Leo. Like it's not.
No, they're saying there is something specially different about a machine doing this than a human. That's not true.
That to me doesn't really make. I think
there's something especially different about a human doing it than a machine. But in general,
what is the difference?
Technology.
The regent of Harvard was just fired for plagiarizing, and if you look at what that plagiarism was, it was nothing. This is way more blatant than what that woman did. I don't know.
I appreciate these rules need to be pressed against. I don't know which way this is going to go, but if we don't have this pressure, it is going to.
You can't wait till it's over. The problem with technology is it moves so fast, and then some market disappears. It's not like journalism in general or newspapers specifically have been doing great recently, right?
Well, that's the argument, but I think that's a bogus argument. Like, we have to save the creators.
We're also going to see both sides of this because the Japanese are going the other way. Right, like they are more and more opening up. Everything is fair. Anything touched by an AI is open to use. And
I think that's correct.
A real question of what's going to happen, what's going to happen to creators. Right, like the experiment is taking place.
Right.
And it could be destructive. We don't know. It's going to be interesting, but the Times has gone through the near-death experience of all news is free.
I have a goofy little blog of my own, right? So let's say I'm looking at my news feed and some site that does what I do says, hey, Microsoft announced something today. And and of course, what I seek out is the original Microsoft post. I don't want to go to base it on whatever they write. A lot of these goons don't even link to that. So I got to go search it, or I think about like, okay, where could it be? What blog? We went through this on the show the other day.
Yep.
And I found the original Microsoft thing. And then I write a story based on what Microsoft has said. Do I owe that original thing that was in my feed some sort of credit because that's where I saw that this happened? Or does that not matter? There's a little ethical debate, but that's the that's the 1 pixel tip of this giant iceberg of what is ethical and or legal. I don't know. I think the New York Times is right to want to be compensated for their content being used.
I think you're insane, but okay. I don't think you want that to happen because I think you would be regret it in the long run. The New York look, they created some examples. I want you to go to ChatGPT and try to, get the New York Times out.
That's a lot of work from a third party to do that. They're not that I don't even know the content.
Well, that's my point is that these are specious examples the New York Times is providing. Is anybody going to go to ChatGPT instead of reading the New York Times?
Not today, but
people go to Wikipedia
or
to read the news. It's a very good news source. Wikipedia is not doing original journalism.
Sure.
That's the next thing.
It's not a good place for breaking news.
Editorialization.
I could picture someone saying in the same way they would say, hey, Google or, hey, whatever Amazon's thing, and say, I heard something just happened. What's going on? And I could picture them doing that with OpenAI or whatever, or ChatGPT or whatever comes out of that. I mean, it is what it is today, but that doesn't mean it stays that way. I mean, people Google search that stuff. So this is another way to get to that data, It's fine if it's like this, AI is great at summarizing things, and you can say, hey, look, here's a bullet list of all the important points of the story. That's transformative, I guess. But just
the New York Times doesn't want them to do that.
No, I could see
if
that.
I were OpenAI, I would say, well, screw you, New York Times. We won't ingest your stuff.
Won't use your data,
They
right?
should not ever pay for this stuff. That's a big slippery slope. They made a mistake.
Wow. All right. Well,
the question is, how good will a machine?
Well, that's like saying they sucked in my book and, they're just going to spit out chunks of it. And it's like, why should I get paid for that?
But it doesn't spit out chunks of it. It transforms it. It summarizes it. It does not.
Except when it doesn't.
But what if it didn't? That's my point.
Stable diffusion ingests a lot of different artists, and maybe it can create something that looks just like Thomas Kinkade, the painter of light. But
Anyone
Thomas Kinkade would have no justification.
Yeah.
Exactly. They would have no justification because that's how every painter works.
I do think there's like what people are waiting for with AI generated art, for it to finally spit out something where you're like, wait a minute, that's a painting that exists. Like, so far, no. Right. But it's that, what is that, A Million Monkeys or whatever?
It was always, well, let's face it, this whole thing started with the mangled Getty logos, right?
Yeah, sure.
But they're mangled, right?
So they're transformed.
Yes.
I wonder how Getty feels about that. Yeah.
Yeah.
If Getty doesn't like it, they shouldn't put their, pictures online.
I am surprised to hear you taking this stance.
Oh, well, of course I am.
Somebody who puts his copyrighted material online.
Yes.
Wow.
And because that's how I work. We don't do original journalism here. I don't.
Hold on a second. But you do. You actually do. I mean,
no, we don't. I mean, most of our shows, like TWiT, for instance, we're reading all the news articles and talking about them.
Well, but you're not narrating a read article.
Occasionally, I'll read a paragraph from it. Sure.
Of course, but that is fair use. That's fair use. That's the definition of fair use. Playing 10 seconds of a song is fair use. Playing the entire song and not paying the artist is theft.
Right.
That's just,
in no case does ChatGPT regurgitate entire New York Times articles ever.
Yeah. Well, and therein lies the use of this case, is to set those lines, right? Is to say, what is the
problem with, fair use, you need some kind of a definition of at what point does fair use cross the line into just copyright infringement?
Yeah. Do they have to ensure that they don't? Like, could this just be an extra subroutine that says never regurgitate?
Yeah, sure.
Right.
It's probably they probably have it in there and it's a screwed up switch statement or something.
It's got a bad bug. I mean, this is the point, right? Like, we are in a new phase with new tools that can consume ravenously all the information available there and regurgitate it in various forms. As long as it can, so now we have to modify and improve our fair use rules to say what's fair and what's not.
Yeah. So one of the 4 tests of fair use, by the way, fair use, we act like it's a law.
It's not.
It's not. It's the right to it's the right to defend yourself in court, as Larry Lessig famously said.
But by the way, part of it involves actually actively protecting yourself, and that's really what the New York Times is doing here.
If they don't show their intent, they don't get to.
What they need to demonstrate, the 4 tests include the effect of the use upon the potential market. What they have to demonstrate, and no court. By the way, this is a failed case, guarantee you. But what the court would have to say is, people are reading ChatGPT instead of the New York Times. It's hurting your market.
Do they have to show that it's happening or that it could happen? Because
the effect
there's a business
of the
model
use
at
upon
OpenAI,
the potential market. The purpose and character of your
That's
use, the nature of the copyrighted work, the amount and substantiality of the portion taken, and the effect of the use.
New York Times has a market, and that market could go down because people don't feel
They'd have
the need.
to prove, by the
listen,
way, this is why they put all those clips in, specious clips. They'd have to prove that somebody would read ChatGPT instead of the New York Times. Good luck. You just go ahead and try and do it.
Could you prove that no one would do it? That it's impossible? That no one would want to do that?
Well, you're not going to get the New York Times any more than you're going to get a Thomas
the New York
Kincaid
Times, honestly, as it is anyway. But like, anyway, look, it's a giant news gathering organization. They have enormous costs. Their business model is not, doing well today for sure.
Yeah, that's their rationale, but that's not a reason to throw out fair use.
Evolution of business.
But this is OpenAI is the spear, the head of the spear here, right, for AI. So they're not just worried about OpenAI. They're worried that if they allow this and do nothing about it, that other less scrupulous places will use this as the example and say, look, you never protected your
There's a long history of mainstream media trying to preserve itself and preserve its business model by coming after new media. And that is just an old form of media trying to preserve its business model. It's not supporting, it doesn't support innovation, it doesn't support the future. It says, let's go back to newspapers. Thank you very much.
I don't know that that's their responsibility. They have a responsibility to the company to
that's
support
fine. And
themselves.
the courts are going to say, no, you're not losing.
Well, we'll see. We'll see. I don't think this will ever hit any courts. I think what's going to happen is that
you called it. It's an extortion play. Pay us because we're special.
And that opens the floodgates because like I said, there's a precedent with Google, and I think that's the model. They're going to have to. I mean, look, Microsoft and OpenAI have kind of ridden this kind of free horse for quite a long time. Building up this incredible empire that no one can assail. And that has nothing to do with the New York Times or any newspaper. It has to do with Google and Amazon and all these small companies.
Well, and has been brought up in the chat. And those tech giants are making billions.
That was in the lawsuit, right?
So get your hand out now, or forever, hold your peace.
Yep. Right. Or
you just kiss the shareholders.
Yeah. Right. Yep. No, I don't really think this is specific. I think it's more like this shows what's possible. Here are some examples, and it's not like this is going to get better. No,
they also jumped to the biggest game. They went with the New York Times,
which you should do,
recognizable name, and Microsoft. Right.
Yep,
there you go.
Perfect, smart. I think it was smart.
It's about and everything to lose because whatever whatever precedent.
Well, what if they do lose? What happens? I mean, it's just the way it is right now. So, whatever. I mean. There's not. You'll lose whatever money it costs you to make this case happen and pay the lawyers, I guess. But it's not like the New York or Microsoft or OpenAI could like countersue them for damages or something. They're so it's not. It's this. I think this was. I'm surprised they didn't reach an agreement, frankly.
Well, and
I'm sure
exactly.
I'm sure Microsoft
now they're playing court step chicken.
Yep.
Hey, we should talk Linux. It's the operating system that runs the internet, a bunch of game consoles, cell phones, and maybe even the machine on your desk. But you already knew all that. What you may not know is that TWiT now has a show dedicated to it, the Untitled Linux Show. Whether you're a Linux pro, a burgeoning sysadmin, or just curious what the big deal is, you should join us on the Club TWiT Discord every Saturday afternoon for news, analysis, and tips to sharpen your Linux skills. And then make sure you subscribe to the Club TWiT exclusive Untitled Linux Show. Wait, you're not a Club TWiT member yet? Well, go to twit.tv/clubtwit and sign up. Hope to see you there.